am here in studio with the entire crew from Duxbury. Looks like you got your top line in here today. I'm going to go right down the line and then I'm going to say why everybody is gathered here. First, from the Select Board, Fernando Guitart. Thank you so much for joining us today. Rob Reardon, Duxbury Fire Chief. How are you?
Thank
Familiar
you.
face here.
Yes, thank you.
Danielle Klingaman, I believe, Superintendent and a first-time visitor here to our studios.
Hello, happy to be here today.
I'm glad to see you. And to my right, the police chief here, Mike Carbone. Thanks for
Thank you.
being here. And he's kind enough to be able to share a microphone.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry, that's a dog hair on the microphone here. This is all friendly, all good, but this is here to talk about a serious issue, and this is an issue that is affecting many towns on the South Shore, and that's about proposed budget overrides. And here in Duxbury, fiscal year 26 proposed budget override, and this would entail a number of departments having to make cuts if this budget override is not passed. Now, I want to make sure that I have the correct amount, and that's $5.8 million override, and that's what's being proposed. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Fernando, you
Yes.
from the Select Board, how did they come up with that number, and what would that cover?
Basically, that would allow us to reinstate all the employees, both in the town and the schools, that would be cut if we didn't have the override. And we'd also actually be able to add additional town employees to meet the needs of the town as it stands, right? There's increased activity on the beach. There's coastal warming that needs to be addressed, coastal resiliency, sorry. And so, we will be able to meet the needs of the town and what the community expects of us.
Now, Fire Chief Rob Reardon, we've got the turbo scanners in there, and we also look online and cover things. We see that you folks and the police department, you guys are busy all day, and sometimes it seems like over busy. I don't believe that you could afford to have one position cut. What would happen if this override didn't go through?
We would be turning the clock back. We'd be turning it back, I think, for both the police and fire to the 1970s. That's when we had 5 firefighters on duty 24/7. Today we have 6. So if we lay people off, we're going to be back to those 1970 levels. And what's important to look at is back then we did 1,000 calls. Now we do 3,000 calls. We had 1 ambulance. Now we run 3. We brought in $1.3 million in ambulance revenue last year. That's where we're going to have problems. We're going to lose ambulance revenue. Our overtime's going to go up, and people are still going to need us. That need's not going to go away.
So in other words, even if they didn't pass the override, the money, they would still have to pay that to pay for the overtime.
You would lose people, but we still need people to respond to these calls.
And from what I remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I've been here for decades, years ago when I first started here, it was about 70% fires, 30% medical. That has flipped, and you are responding to a lot of emergency medical calls. You can't waste a second with something like that.
Absolutely. We're about 60-40.
Okay.
Remember, Duxbury has an aging population, and they require services, and they're requesting our ambulance on a regular basis, so that's why you see all of our calls increasing.
Absolutely. Now, you work hand-in-hand many times with the police department. Chief Carbone, tell me a little bit about what your staffing levels look like and what you would not like to see happen. Your staffing levels, what, from the 1970s too?
Exactly. We've had the same patrol staff since 1976, the same amount of patrol staff since 1976. And, back then the call volume was about 9,000 in 1976. Today, in 2024, it's about 26,000. Population has increased. Everything has increased. And, if this override wasn't to go through, we would be going backwards, just like Chief Reardon stated. And again, many people feel that with layoffs there's a reduce in cost. Not with police and fire, because we can't just not fill out vacancies. We're already understaffed, and we would have to fill those vacancies with overtime. So that means our overtime budget would go up significantly.
What are you worried about? What would be the worst possible scenario? What if a major incident happened in the town of Duxbury? Would everybody, didn't mean to interrupt you, but
No.
would anybody ever get a call? You have an emergency, okay, I think I can get somebody there in 10 minutes. It's like, no, you can't. I mean, could that ever happen?
Absolutely. Our response times would be much slower response times. We would become reactive instead of proactive, which you don't want. No police department should be just all reactive. It should be proactive as well. So, this is critical to public safety. without a doubt.
Okay. And Danielle Klingaman, you're the school superintendent. Duxbury School's known as, of course, one of the premier school systems here on the South Shore. Does this worry you about this proposed override?
Yeah, our school funding is definitely a concern. And we've heard some issues raised about whether we are overstaffed or if there's been mismanagement, but we've known for quite some time. Our previous superintendent back in 2019 had indicated to the community that our operating costs were reaching levels where the revenue in our community wouldn't be able to sustain. So without an override, we're definitely going to see a reduction in our services. And I think the difference between the schools and the other town departments is with the override, we aren't looking to add any additional positions. Ours is with, if the override doesn't pass, we are going to lose considerable amount of services. Our class size will go up. We won't be able to provide universal free kindergarten to our students. Our educators won't be compensated at appropriate levels. So we've really tried to consolidate staffing over the past couple of years when we've reduced a total of 13.5 positions in the last 2 fiscal years. And without an override, we would be losing an additional 12 to 18 positions from teachers, tutors, support staff, and administrators.
When parents talk to you about this, what are their fears or concerns about what would happen if the override doesn't go through?
Our parents are very concerned about their ability to continue to pay tuition for full-day kindergarten. That is a burden on a lot of our families who have 3, 4, 5 students that are going through our kindergarten program. Our parents definitely have a lot of tuition, different fees that they're responsible, including bus fees. They have to pay for co-curriculars and athletic fees. So families are concerned about that. Also, our families really value the education and the outcomes that they've seen previous graduates have with students' ability to have really strong course selection and be able to go on to attend top colleges and universities. And they're concerned about whether or not their students will be able to have the class selection that they've had in the past, or whether they'll be limited to programs that may or may not be offered or fit into kids' schedules. And so I think our parents are concerned about class size and ability for their kids to get intervention and extra support through reading, math specialists, and tutors, which is going to be at stake if an override doesn't pass in our community.
Now, you folks have been holding a series of public information sessions. There was one February 12th, and there's another one coming up on Wednesday, February 26th. Fernando,
That's indeed correct.
That's right. When you're talking to people in the community, just even running into them at the transfer station and places like that, I want to add that could be impacted as well. What are their concerns when they're talking to you?
Obviously, the concerns are the reduction services that both chiefs have outlined and the schools, but also it'll impact their tax bills. I think that's important to realize that at the end of the day, the override will result in an increase in the tax bill. So based on the average family home, that should be about just under $1,000 a year, about $234 a quarter. Again, it's a big sum, and as a town, as a select board, we're cognizant of that impact. But at the end of the day, we need to be able to provide the services that the town, the residents demand and come to expect.
And when you say services, again, public works, which we haven't really hit on, what about, doesn't that include things like the great job that the local guys do with plowing the roads, especially thinking about the weather this past weekend that seemed to have a little bit of everything out there, and people can pretty much depend on having good roadways.
You're exactly right. Actually, if the override doesn't pass, we'd have to reduce 5 positions at within DPW. And so obviously, reduction of positions like that impacts services and be able to respond in time to get the roads out there and get people to school and get people to work. So yes, it will have an impact if the override doesn't pass.
And is there a website that people can go to find out more about what's happening in Duxbury if this override, this $5.8 million override doesn't pass?
I mean, that's really important. That's a great question. I think we have created a web page. If you look at the town web page, right on the home page, they'll be able to get information there. Like you mentioned, there's a forum February 26th. I think it's really important that people get themselves informed. It's an important vote that they're facing at the March annual town meeting, 8th of March, and at the ballot box. I want people it's really important for people to be informed, to make the right decision. They have a big decision that they face. At the end of the day, it's the residents that will approve whether we have an override or not. Not the select board, not the schools, not the school committees. Is the resident of this town that will approve or not the override.
And I don't want to dwell on this part, but do you think there is some misinformation out there about this funding?
It's a big number. It's $5.8 million and will impact towns, the residents' tax bills. So yes, I think there's lots of information out there. But at the end of the day, please do attend the forum. You'll get the straight facts. Please do access the town's website. Take a look. You can also actually go on and take a look at your assessed value. That's the most important thing that will impact your tax bill is your assessed value. You can go online to the Duxbury's webpage and find out for yourself and make an informed decision. I think that's what every resident, we all do, is stay informed and get the right information to make the right decision.
And Fire Chief Rob Reardon, if you could say one more thing to the residents of the town of Duxbury about how important this is, what would you tell them?
I've been in the department for almost 24 years, and I think this is probably going to be one of the most important decisions that I've seen at a town meeting. And I think a lot of people take town services for granted. And you don't have to think about it. We just show up, we get things done. And that's not just fire and police, it's your schools, it's behind the scenes, it's IT, it's HR. There's so many departments that make things happen for you. And if this doesn't go through, I think you're going to have to think about your services. There's going to be things that might affect, you might be affected by that you don't even realize. So like Fernando said, arm yourself with the information, make an informed decision that works for your family.
Okay. Fernando, you wanted to make another comment.
Yeah, it's really important. We haven't faced this as a town of Duxbury. The last operational override, was 1989, well over 30 years ago. So this is brand new for the community, for most of us, and so it's an important decision. Please do get the right information to make an informed decision.
And when I think of Duxbury, I not only think of the schools, I think of the beach and I think of the library.
Right.
Great services in your town. I guess everything would have that trickle-down effect, and somehow things would be curtailed or you wouldn't be able to have access to them. Police Chief Carbone, what else can you tell our listeners? If they're, a lot of times you guys are behind the scenes, you show up maybe sometimes not at people's greatest moments, but then you also can help people out. What do you want people to know about the police department of Duxbury?
Well, the Duxbury Police Department is a very service-oriented police department. We respond to all calls, we address all the calls, and that's what the residents of Duxbury want. And I think that's important. As being the police chief, I make sure that the officers are very service-oriented. And losing officers if this didn't go through would have catastrophic consequences on actually having our services, dealing with it with the residents. So to sum it all up, the compromise without this 2.5 override going through is going to have compromises on police services, officer safety, and the community's well-being. And I think that's very important that people realize that it's been a while since the town has actually had an override, and it has been a long time since we've actually realized that the patrol staff for the town of Duxbury needs to be modern-day policing. I mean, we're still back in the 1976 patrolling, and that's not acceptable.
Those numbers that you said scare me. If you could give me the numbers again, you said how many calls you responded to back then in general and how many now. I think that really quantifies it.
Yeah, so actually I did my research, and when we realized that our patrol staff was at the same staffing levels as 1976, we also looked at the data from 1976. In 1976, there was approximately 9,000 calls to the police department. Today, in 2024, there is over 26,000 calls. The population has more than doubled since 1976. And the patrol staff has remained the same. Currently we have about 20 patrol officers. Right now we're not fully staffed to 20 patrol, and that's the same staffing that there was in 1976.
These are some tough numbers to look at.
It's crazy, and I've had this conversation with numerous chiefs in local towns, and they all say that I've never heard of such a thing. How's just staffing been the same as
That's a tough situation. And then I just want to head again on the schools and Danielle Klingaman, a little bit more about what people need to remember about the schools. Again, Duxbury's schools have an excellent reputation. I know you want to maintain that.
Absolutely. I think I do want to mention that there's an additional information session on February 28th at 9:30 at Duxbury Free Library for people that may prefer a morning session. And I think what's been really nice to see with the information sessions that have been held before is that members of our community have been able to ask some questions directly to the department heads and not just rely on information that they may have received secondhand or seen on social media. I think as a school superintendent, I just want to make it really clear for anyone that hasn't been in school for a while to understand that our students have really unique needs. In this day and age, school has not become easier for students. It's become a lot harder to be a child growing up and navigating their way through the school system. And so I just would really hope that our community understands that as a school department, we do understand that we take up a large portion of the town budget overall, and so that we try to be very prudent with our staffing decisions. And but we are a service organization, and people are what make a difference for our students. And so we have a lot at stake here with the override. And if anyone has questions about our administrative structure or full-day kindergarten or any of the issues that have been raised, I would really encourage them to reach out directly to me or to any of our school committee members who are well-versed in this whole budget process and how it all breaks down. And I haven't had anyone from the community reach out to me directly, which I strongly encourage. You can call my office anytime, and I can connect you with the person that could answer your question, but I should be able to answer most of the budget questions myself. So anyone out there with questions about anything.
What's the office number?
The office number is 781-934-7600. And if you Google Duxbury Public Schools, you can find all of our contact information, phone numbers, and email addresses right on the website there. So please reach out directly, and I'm glad to sit down or have a phone conversation with anyone who has school department budget questions.
And it was good. You told us about an additional information session on the 28th at the library. What time was that?
That is at 9:30.
9:30, so that's during the day. And then there's one on Wednesday, February 26th at 6:30 p.m. So, and I'll check out the town library. I think you folks have made very good points about everything. We've got Fernando Guitart from the Select Board, Fire Chief Rob Reardon, Danielle Klingaman, who's the school superintendent, and Mike Carbone, the police chief. We appreciate everybody coming in here today. We're going to put this interview up online so anybody can go back and listen to this, and I'm sure you're going to get some more questions. Remember, if you live in Duxbury, March 8th, town meeting, then March 22nd, town election. As I tell people when we do our election forums, remember, if you don't vote, you don't have a voice. I'm Christine James, 95.9 WATD. 9 WATD. 9 WATD.